All right, peoples, this is Playing in Traffic, and we are live on YouTube. Where else? YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch.
Yeah,
Twitch.
there you go.
We got the boys in the house. Terry, what's happening?
Yo, what's going on, everyone?
I'm gonna say I'm right down there, right? I'm doing the Brady Bunch thing, right?
She's upstairs.
Yes,
He's upstairs to the right on mine. You know, we got the cast of characters. Got Lewis Lee bringing it. You know, we got Ray Guarino, Enough Radio, and of course we got
I know where that is. It's down here, right?
special guest, the Madman, and I'm going to explain to you why he's a madman. You're not going to believe it. My man Richard Holdener. Yo, say what's up to the people. Hard people.
What's up, man? What's up to the audience? How are you guys doing? Happy Thursday, right?
Yes, sir. Hey, we appreciate you having you on, man.
Thank you guys, man. I'm a big fan.
You know, we talked like 2 years ago about getting you on the show. Sorry it took so long, but you know, Terry is always hogging up the space.
I was going to say that's probably my fault, but I really like to blame it on Terry. I think.
Of course. You should have seen it when we went out to dinner. When I was in California, we went out to dinner, and we were doing a live feed on Instagram, and we must have been talking for about a good 20 minutes before we realized the camera wasn't on.
I forgot that we had to go back and re-talk about everything. But I was much better the second take, though.
This is true until you told them that I was having a Long Island iced tea instead of an iced tea.
Those are good.
Oh man, they'll put you down.
I wasn't. It was mine was just a regular iced tea.
Those are a Long Island iced tea is no joke. You know that you're serious when you go and order that.
Can't do it.
You know, I'll tell you a little secret about that. Growing up on Long Island, being in the bar at it was like 17 or 18. It was the year that Long Island iced tea came out, and I think I was turning 18, and I was drinking age back then. So but we had already been regulars in the bar for a year or so, and friends were just buying me iced teas all night. I'm like, damn, these things are great. Like, nothing, not a problem. Until I stood up or tried to stand up and just literally went right back down. And I guess someone drove me home that night.
So that's the thing. That's the key is never stand up. You just have to stay on your bar stool and then everything will be okay.
Actually, I could have just been sitting in my car in the parking lot and they could have been serving me. They would have been good to go. I would have just driven home and it would have been good.
Oh, yeah.
We did
like
that.
The Sonic. Did they roll up to you on roller skates?
Yeah,
that's it. Long Island iced teas are no joke. And when you go out, we used to go out. My buddy Harold and I, we would go out, and they would serve buckets of Long Island iced teas to the clubs that we would go to. I'm like, man, this is definitely going to get ugly.
So, Richard, what do you have going on out there? You're in Northern California?
Yeah, I live in Northern California between Sacramento and San Francisco. And as I'm sure most of the people watching would know that I do all my stuff with the guys down at West Tech Performance. Shout out to Steve Brulé and Ish and Eric and Troy and Rick, the owner, for getting all that stuff done. Because I've been going out there. It's got to be coming up on 25 or 30 years now, I think. And it's just like everything. The first time I went there, after I showed up, I'm like, the first time I dynoed something there, I'm like, oh my God, I have so many questions. And I decided right then that day that I was not going to let them get rid of me ever. so I just attached myself onto it. I've been there ever since.
Since I started watching your videos, I didn't realize how much is entailed in actual dyno and just a regular engine before you put any add-ons onto it.
Oh yeah. I mean, the thing that people don't realize, and I'm sure for what you're doing too, people see a video and they go, oh yeah, I could easily do that. That takes no time at all. It takes no effort. It takes no preparation. Mm-hmm. And what they see, just like when they saw, because all of this started when I was doing magazine stories, basically. So, you'd put together the motor and then you would test it and you'd write about, okay, this cylinder head did this or this camshaft did this. But they don't realize that all of the stuff up to that 2 pages or 3 pages of the story and the 10 or 12 or 15 photos that it took, just like an endless amount of work that you have to do before you get that information. So, it's like anything. It's a lot of work, but if you like it, like for me, I just live for the dyno results. So when I get those, I'm willing to do all the other stuff, go to the wrecking yard and lay underneath and, have transmission fluid drop in your ear and stuff, all the stuff you got to do to make that happen. It's a lot of fun.
Right. That's a wonderful thing, man. Like I was telling you earlier, I love turbos. Terry's pushing the supercharger, But man,
there's a superchargers.
I like the whistle, man. And you hear that turbo kick in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think the bus is going to fit on the dyno though.
Yeah, I got a school bus. I need you to tweak it for me. Tweak my turbo.
What school bus is it? A Bluebird? What is it?
Yeah, Bluebird International.
Oh, cool. What year is it?
03.
Nice. And so what motor's in it?
The DT 466E.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So are you doing anything to it or just cruising around?
I'm turning into an RV. Me and the wife
nice.
we're gonna retire and travel.
Oh, that's perfect.
We'll be out there messing around with you too. We'll come out there.
I definitely want to ride in the bus then.
Oh yeah.
That's what I told him.
Oh yeah.
In SEMA.
Yeah, I'm coming through.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and if it's big enough, I'll just sleep on the bus too. I don't even have to get a hotel room or nothing. That'd be awesome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's going to have a kitchen in there, a bed,
shower, bath.
I'm in.
Yeah, full blown house.
That'd be great. We can work on the motor while you're driving. That'd be perfect.
That's what I'm saying. We can do it.
Yeah, we'll turn the boost up. That'll be all good.
Yep. I got a guy coming. I got to get him to get the governor off. He has the governor on it. So.
Oh yeah.
If I can get to 75, I'll be good, I think.
Yeah, you don't need to
I don't know you want to be doing too many high-speed chases with the bus, but certainly cool.
Hey, you never know when you got to get into somebody. They act up at the light. I might have to put the foot in.
Hey, you got to do what you got to do, right? Sometimes you got to.
See, I know Lewis. He's gonna try to turn it up a little bit every now and then.
Just give a little tweak.
You got to make it your own, right? I mean,
yeah.
No, that's cool stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I was gonna ask Ray a question.
What?
About what's it called? I found the answer out because when we were talking about the last video I did where it was with the brackets for the Le Mans, I believe on the Hideaway headlights on 68, 69, they had a different bracket for the Hideaway headlights itself. Whereas the non-Hideaway headlights and the Le Mans Tempest T37, whatever it is, they shared the same bumper bracket.
I would tend to believe that the Le Mans and Tempest with the chrome bumper all share the same brackets. Yeah.
Yeah. So did the Endura bumper with.
Here, we'll move this up here.
The Hideaway
headlights. Okay, yeah. I would go with that too. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I did a little research on that, and I found out.
Is that better?
Okay.
I'm talking to other people. T37 for the win. I really like those. When I got a quick T37 story for you, I went to visit Dulcich at his place, and we were picking up a couple of motors that they were giving me because that's how I get all my best motors. If somebody gives them to me, they cast them off, and I think that they're gold. And so I took my two kids there with me to get the engines and put them in the truck and take them back home. And they had a T37 there, and it had a broken window. And it had a price tag on it that said $1,200 or $1,500, whatever. My youngest son's like, Daddy, you should totally buy that. That's cheap. You should get it. I'm like, yes, I know I should. I don't think that they would take that for it though. But he was all in. He wanted to see a muscle car come home.
That's how it starts.
I have a T37 story for you too. I think
awesome.
It was probably 1974. I was in summer school on Long Island, and I was taking driver's ed, but I was taking another class too. And outside the window of the school, it was a different school. It wasn't the one I was in high school. It was the middle school. I guess one of the janitors or something had it was probably like a year old or 2 years old, T37 parked outside. And I didn't know what it was, but I'm like looking at the stripes. I'm looking at the Rally 2s. I'm like, yeah, that's just like a cool looking car.
Yeah.
It's not a GTO, but it's what is that? It's like seeing a heavy Chevy, and you're like, what the hell is going on? So it always stuck with me.
It's GTO-esque.
It is, to beat the insurance companies.
Yeah.
It has potential.
Oh
yeah,
definitely.
And it's cool enough that like the right kind of guys that see it are going to know what it is, but a lot of people are not. So it's that kind of car, and I really like those.
Well, yeah, it's like like the heavy Chevy. I mean, it's hiding in plain sight. You can't mistake it for any other kind of car. I mean, it is, it is what it is. Yeah, I love it when they played around with models like that and just came out with, like the Rally 350 Olds. Another one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it was an insurance company beater.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I like that they played those games.
Yeah, but I tell you, like I always thought back in that era that Pontiac, like all across the board, Bonneville, Granville, whatever, back then, with the exception of the Grand Prix, they all had like a sad look to them in the front. It looked like they were crying a little bit. Like they were just very sad looking cars.
Because no one's paying attention to them. That's why.
That's why.
I can see where you could come up with that. Yeah, I can see where you could see that. Yeah.
But the Pontiac side had all of the cool stuff though. They had better aerodynamics. They had better handling. They had all kinds of cool stuff. I remember hearing a really great story about the Pontiac stuff. And they took the cars. This is when they were running NASCAR, and they took the cars out and they ran them on the track. And the Pontiac went faster than the Chevrolet did. And then they swapped the motors, and they put the Chevy motor in the Pontiac motor in the Chevrolet. And then the Pontiac still went faster. And they're like, why is that? Why is it doing that? And they found two things. One was the aerodynamics of the Pontiac at the time, and I can't remember which model it was because this was pretty early on. But the aerodynamics of the Pontiac was better. And the other thing that it had is the Pontiac had a cold air intake ducted to the carburetor. So they were actually taking cowl induction, basically, kind of like they eventually did on the 69 Z28s and on the LS6 Chevelle and those. But the Pontiac was drawing cold air. So its motor, whichever one it had in there, because they knew that the Chevrolet had a little bit more power than the Pontiac of the two cars that they were testing. But the cold air made the difference, and then the aerodynamics of the Pontiac were a little bit better too. So I love these kind of stories.
How do you say that? Yeah. One of the things I do is I read a lot of old magazines. I got them all over the place. I was just reading one upstairs in the bathroom, and it was out of they had like 101 tips. It was a hot rod magazine from, I think, the 80s or 90s. And one of them was about cold air induction. And they mentioned how, Pontiac really only had the ram air engines, but you had the Trans Am scoops were fake. The GTO had a fresh air intake. And they said it really, anything that's in that plane of the hood, it's in the wrong barrier.
It's in the wrong spot, yeah.
Yeah, it's in the wrong spot. So the only car that they recommended, which I agree with, that had the right aerodynamics at the time was the Oldsmobile that picked it up from under the bumper.
Yeah.
Because
they had the duct going under, right?
Under the bumpers, right. So at least you're picking it up in that lower barrier. I don't know what intake they were dealing with there, but
well, they were drawing air from the cowl basically, so they're routing the ducting back to the cowl area, which is the pressurized source when you're going at speed where the windshield is, and that's how your vents and all of that stuff work.
Right.
So they were getting essentially some pressurized air. They weren't talking about that too much, but they were getting a source of cold air, and if you get cold air, it makes more power.
Now, I was going to say, if it was in NASCAR, they would reverse the air cleaner, and Chevy had the parts in the book with that. And I was going to do that with a couple of my cars. Cut right into the firewall for the cowl, but you kind of need that long, wide accordion because
like the Z28s were like that.
Yeah,
the 80. Yep.
It's got to be
even the Chevelle. That's why I went with a flap hood, even though there's an LS in this thing, and it doesn't. It's more for show, but
you got to have the flap hood, though. I mean,
you got to have the flap.
Yeah.
And but the real flap, what people don't understand, unless you have one, there were two doors. There were two doors,
one above and one below.
Right. One on the hood and one below. That was actuated like the 80 Z28, where the one on the hood was vacuum.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. The one in the back, that's electrical.
Okay.
And what's it called? So with the Z28, you had this little thing that stuck out, and you had a rod off the gas pedal. So when you got like maybe 3/4 of the way in, it would open up.
Like a nitrous activation switch, like a full throttle switch, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. So
what other one was cool is the Dodge or Plymouth had the air grabber that used to open up on the hood too, and they had the little drawing or something on the side of it that had a cool little face or something on it, right?
It's a shark tooth.
Awesome.
That was on the Super Big.
51 fighter.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Matt Goban was just saying he thinks that I think he's talking about what you're talking about was between the Chevy and the Pontiac was when they had the Aero Coupe. That was in the 80s. They had that Monte SS.
They had the Monte Carlo,
Oh my God, that was a hideous looking car. Those things were worth so much money. It was horrible.
You know, I got guys running around my town here that's got those big wheels on them. They're just messing them up, man. I'm like, dude, you know how much the car is worth?
Right.
The back glass by itself.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's got to be big money now.
Oh yeah.
I'll tell you what. The Grand Prix 4 plus 4, 2 plus 2. That's what it was. It was Grand Prix 2 plus 2.
Yeah.
That was a better looking car. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but you don't see very many of them though.
You don't see
classier too inside. Yeah. They're more luxury.
Well, see, that's what it was. The Pontiac. That's the excitement, man. That's the excitement.
Hey, John DeLorean did a good job when he was at Pontiac.
Yeah,
he was the man DeLorean.
He did good stuff.
He was the man DeLorean.
Yeah.
Brian did just confirm that it was the Aero Coupe and the 2+2 that the 2+2 was the car that ran faster.
Okay, and I remember a buddy having a, Jesus, I'm going to say it was a 73 or 74. I forgot what it was. No, 74 Grand Prix. That was like the second year when it went long.
Yeah.
That was the prettiest car, man. It was burgundy. It had a white Landau roof with a white gut sunroof.
It had the lights with the cross in it.
Like my 70 Camaro had, the one in the front. Yeah, those are cool.
Let's not talk about 70 Camaros, please. A sore spot on this show.
That was my first car.
Mine was a 75.
Nice.
You know,
my first one was a split bumper, but it was a base. It was a rally sport, but it was a base car, so it had a 2-barrel motor in it.
That's all right.
Yeah,
that's all right.
Mine was an 88.
Nice. I still have my I have a 1988 5-liter Mustang that I bought new in November of '87. Yeah. So I'm original owner 5-liter still. I still have the car.
Nice. That was a pretty fast car that year.
It was the first year of the Mass Air for California only in '88, and it was a stick. And I bought it with. I deleted almost everything. I didn't delete AC because I needed that, but I bought it so I could go showroom stock racing in SCCA. Right. Shortly after that, they brought out the 1LE Camaro, which unfortunately was a much better car because I would go through brakes. I would go through rotors and pads, sometimes calipers, every race. We would just destroy them. And the 1LE Camaros would outbrake us without any problem at all. They were better cars, but I love the Mustang. It worked out good, and I still have it.
Hey, Rich, are you in the 200 club?
Yes, I went 227 in my Honda Civic, which to this day, as far as I know, is still the world's fastest Honda Civic.
Wow. That had to be scary.
The Civic actually is a front-wheel drive car at Bonneville is definitely the way to go as opposed to a rear-wheel drive car because it's such a loose surface that putting power down is very difficult. So if you have a rear-wheel drive car, the back end kind of wants to pass the front end and get a little crazy. But on a front-wheel drive car, the weight's over the drive wheel. We even had an open diff. We didn't have a limited slip or a quafe or anything. It was just a stock open diff, and the thing would just track like perfectly straight. And until we broke a half shaft at the 4-mile mark, and then things got exciting.
It's better to have a car that pulls than to push.
Yeah, it worked out a lot better. The back end's just like along for the ride. It's just like, hey, we're just doing our thing back here. Nothing's going on.
Yeah.
So
you need an Audi Quattro.
Oh, I do like those. Michelle Mouton. Yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah.
And all those little Group E cars, a Mazda 323 GTX, those are awesome. The Lancia Deltas, the little MG Metros. I got to ride in an RS200 up at a Virginia City hill climb that was all modified. I just love those cars.
Wow.
So what is your main car now? Like, I know you said you had a Mustang, but do you have anything else? Like
the one that I drive every day and I get questions about this all the time because I do a lot of LS testing. Obviously, is I have a 2002 Chevy Silverado with a 5.3 in it that's all stock that now has 300,000 miles in it, and everyone's like, "Well, did you put a turbo on it? Did you do all this?" I'm like, "That it has a 4L60E transmission. It's made of glass. I mean, I don't even want to put a cam in it because I know that it will. I hardly ever even go full throttle in that truck because I know that I'm just waiting for inevitably something is going to break on it." But the other car,
when that day happens, what are you going to do?
I think buy a new truck. I have to have one car. Like my wife has a new Mercedes, and so we drive that everywhere. But I have to have one car that I can use, that stays stock, that I can go pick everything up in.
Mhm.
The other cars I have, like the Mustang, doesn't have an engine in it right now. It's been sitting for a really long time. I just bought the Dodge Omni GLH Turbo that has a modified 2.5 big turbo, intercooler, all that stuff on it. So the motor's hurt right now because I bought it that way. So that's a little bit of a project. I also have a 71 240Z. Again, there's no motor in it. I bought it because I took the motor out of it because we were going to do a V8 swap, and I still want to do that, although I do have an RB25 sitting there that I also am going to do testing on. It would be perfect in that car. It would just look awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What else do I have? I have a 1996 F355 Spider Ferrari.
Oh.
That just sits under a cover its whole life, and I'm now probably going to sell it. And the only reason I have it is because I got such a good deal on it. It was like one of the least expensive cars I've ever bought. So It was such a good deal that and I've always wanted a Ferrari, and I drove it around, took my kids to school in it and stuff. And then now it just kind of sits, and I want to get something. I'd actually much rather now get some kind of driver muscle car, a 1970 Chevelle or a Camaro or even an old Challenger, and make it look like a TA 6-pack or that kind of deal. Something that we can drive and I could go out to date night with my wife in, because in that car, I can't afford to fix it. So if I drive it and somebody bangs into it or gets a paint scratch or whatever, I'm not a Ferrari guy, so I can't even fix it.
Well, I got parts of a Challenger if you want to start building one.
I really, really like the first of all, I admire Dan Gurney, who was in every way like 75 different kinds of awesome. I have a good story about Dan Gurney. I don't think that I've ever met him, but one of the guys from Osco Performance, Dennis Ozzie, was telling a story about when the people were over, when Dan was alive and he was over at All American Racers, that when he would walk into the shop and he would stop and talk to somebody and he'd start telling a story, that everybody there just dropped the wrenches and stopped what they were doing and then went over to listen to the stories that he was telling. Because, I mean, look what the guy's done. And if you ever read anything about him, that everything that everybody says is the guy was like, just the greatest kind of stand-up guy. He was an awesome driver. He was great to be around. He was just, he was the right kind of person. So, but one of my favorite cars is that the AA Arcuda. So with the 6-pack on it and the TA 6-pack, the same kind of thing, just a Dodge and a Chrysler version of it. But I
much
really
rather have
like
an AAR than a Hemi. Much rather have an AAR than a Hemi.
Oh, me too. I'm not a big Hemi fan. I know what they're worth and all of that, but a 346-pack car would be much higher on my list than.
And it's a better looking car too.
Yeah, I do. I really like it.
Yeah. Did you ever see that show Uppity? They've talked about Dan Gurney. There's a show on Netflix about Willie Ribs.
Oh, Willie T. Ribs. Yeah, I raced with Willie, not with him, but when I was running World Challenge was the same time that he was driving in Trans Am. So World Challenge was a support series for Trans Am. So he was at the races and at the drivers' meetings and stuff when we were there. Yeah.
Yeah,
he was a good driver.
Oh no, he was the story's so sad. I mean, he just didn't get the opportunity, but he was the goods. He was, and he loved Dan Gurney, and they talk about Dan Gurney a lot. And it got to it's really cool because when he was a kid, he took a picture with Dan Gurney, right? Come to find out that he raced for Dan Gurney later on in life.
See, that's just
that's great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That was kind of the neat thing about being there. Like I remember going to the Long Beach Grand Prix, which we went to a lot, and this was back when Little Al was driving, and this was kind of like his track. And I remember going there thinking, okay, next year I'm gonna race in this, not in an Indy car, but I'm gonna race in this. So I was running with the guys from Bear Racing in World Challenge, and I ended up buying that car, and we put a supercharger on it, and I ran in the Bridgestone Supercar Series, which was a support series for the IndyCar guys that weekend. So I actually got to run at the Long Beach Grand Prix. So the cool thing about it was we were outmatched by the other cars that were there, and more than likely the drivers as well. But you do get to sit in drivers meetings with, like, when I was racing, Paul Newman was driving one of the Lotuses.
Nice.
So you get to sit in drivers' meetings with guys like Paul Newman, who I'm not a big, I don't get googly-eyed over
Starstruck
and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I don't get starstruck over that. But he was one of the guys that just, for me, was just like super awesome. But also like Mario Andretti and all those guys were there at the drivers' meeting. So you're like, this is so awesome.
Yeah. Mario is a very nice guy. Very nice guy. I like Mario.
Yeah, I've met him at SEMA, but I didn't get to talk to him that much. But he's he did everything. He was one of the guys that back in the day, like Parnelli Jones and all these guys, that just drove everything. They didn't care. He wasn't just an IndyCar driver. He wasn't. I mean, he was an IndyCar champion, a Formula One champion. So he did that, but he also drove everything. He drove USAC and midgets and just Can-Am and everything back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a real deal.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely.
I talked to what's it called? Mr. Andretti. I call him Mr. Andretti because like anyone at that level,
he is Mr. Andretti, definitely. Yeah.
Muhammad Ali, Mr. Richard Petty.
Oh yeah.
Mr. Magic Johnson. And I talked to him and I told him, I was like flat out. I was like, I asked him, "What's your favorite car?" He goes, "Any car I can win it." And he asked me off the camera, "What do you know any of my cars?" I was like, I would have to say my favorite car that you ever drove was that Player Special.
Oh yeah, the John Player deal. Yeah,
I was like that. I even still have the G Plus, the AFX G Plus.
Yeah,
I still have the AFX G Plus. I loved it.
Oh yeah, no, that's good stuff.
And then I went on to Richard Petty.
Another guy who could drive.
Man,
those guys were real drivers because they didn't have the technology. You know what I mean?
No, they had something special about them that, not to take away anything from Lewis Hamilton or any of these guys, obviously, but what they were doing a lot of times was adapting to stuff that was thrown at them, and then because the car was less than 100%, let's say, and they would work around it, which was an amazing thing.
Yeah, and I remember seeing, I guess it was a couple of years ago, I forgot who the driver was, but it was a new NASCAR driver, and they pulled out one of those old NASCAR like a Dodge Charger, like how Richard Petty, the 43, and they allowed him to drive it around the track, and he was just like, I couldn't do it. He goes, once this car got to about 110, that was it for me. He tapped out. This is a professional driver. He's going 180.
Really, and imagine like in some of those cars, like the Super Bs and stuff, they were going 200 in those cars. So it was pretty fast.
With no power steering and they were working.
Yeah. Their power steering was big steering wheels.
You can imagine how loose that steering wheel must have been.
Yeah. I mean, guys like Mark Martin and Dale Earnhardt, even later than Petty and stuff. Those guys were like real guys.
With wrapped in electrical tape.
Yeah.
I've been like seeing earlier NASCARs when these guys are on the beach.
In the 50s.
In convertible.
Daytona,
in Bel Airs.
And they're wearing T-shirts with open helmets and smoking a cigarette as they drive out the window.
Marlboros.
Well, you gotta look good while you're doing it, right? You can't just do it.
No helmet whatsoever. They had a helmet. It was like a skull cap.
Yeah.
A lot of them early on were just leather.
Football helmets.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Yeah.
Couldn't do that, man. Even in a convertible now, there's no way.
I don't even like when somebody else is driving, even if it has a top on it.
Yeah, me either.
I'm not a convertible man.
And that comes from, like, I did a lot of instruction. I did a lot of driving instruction, and it came from that. Like when I was out on the track, and I could drive from the passenger, which confused a lot of people. So I could drive on the track from the passenger side, and a lot of guys can do that. It's not that big a deal. I would tell them, okay, look here, start feeling it. You need to start turning in. Okay, here's your apex. Okay, now you can feel it. We want to start exiting out. And we're doing that. And I'm telling them, hey, look, you can do this. This is not, it's not magic. It's not that hard. I said, just look at, see that rock right there? When you can't see that rock anymore, that's when you need to turn in. And then you need to go to right there and be looking at the big picture, and you tell them all of that stuff. But when I'm in the passenger seat, just driving around town, it's just, I'm frightened beyond all belief.
I do not like it. you're out of control.
I don't like it at all.
Yep.
That's all good though.
Yeah. So did you guys see a couple of the cool videos that I just posted recently? A couple of the cool tests that I did. Guys have been wanting me to do compound boost for a long time. So I did way back. I did compound turbo. So one turbo feeding another turbo on an LS. And I thought that was really cool. And I just did it as a gee whiz thing because I'd never done it before. I'd never done, you know what? I take that back. I had done it before. in my Chevy Sprint, we set some land speed records with this turbo Sprint. So it was making like 110 at the tire, and we went 119 miles an hour in the standing mile. And then we set 2 records, and we were getting ready to set our 3rd record, and then the clutch let go. So it started slipping, so we couldn't set our 3rd record. But then we were going to go to Bonneville, and we brought the car home. We're putting a cage in, and then somebody stole the car, unfortunately. I still have the motor, but somebody stole the car. So I was so disappointed because I love that car. But before they stole it, I did do some testing on a compound setup because the Sprint Turbo has a little tiny turbo, as you would imagine. I mean, it was rated at 70 horsepower with the turbo, so it didn't make a ton of power. So I took a Volkswagen turbo and then compounded those 2 on the chassis dyno to make that work. But then I did one on the LS, again, just more of a gee whiz thing. Not that you need to do that or that I would even recommend it on that application. It was just kind of cool to have 2 junkyard, this junkyard motor with 2 cheap turbos blowing into each other and make lots of boost, make lots of power. And recently what I did was we took a junkyard 3800 Series 2 V6, the supercharged motor that's in the Pontiac Grand Prix or the Buick Regal GS, those kinds of things. And so it had a supercharger on it, and then we added a turbo to that. So we have the turbo blowing into the supercharger with an intercooler in between the 2, running on E85. And again, it's probably not what I would recommend a guy do, but we don't always do what they should do. We do what they want us to do, and those were really kind of cool tests, and people like that because it's it's boost on boost, and there's nothing a motor needs more than boost. Even if it already has some boost, it obviously needs more boost, right?
Yeah.
That's it. That's the things you wouldn't necessarily do to your own car at home, but you want to see somebody else do it
first.
And the nice thing on the dyno, it's easy to do too. So we don't have to ruin a car to do it, and it takes a lot less time just to build it on the dyno, and everything fits.
Right.
Now, when you're at West Tech and you're doing all those dyno pulls, what is it? You guys got like a bunch of engines that you just have laying around? I mean, because
I probably have at any one time. I think that the most I've ever had is 21 or 22 different engines.
Wow.
And that sounds like a lot, except that if you go buy them for a couple $100 from the wrecking yard, it's not a fortune. And the nice thing is those engines, if we blow one up, which has happened many times, you don't care about it. Like if I put together a brand new motor and it has forged rods and forged pistons and the best heads and all of that stuff on it, and then I put it on there, I almost don't want to run it because that's the motor that I'm worried about is going to get hurt. If I go get a motor from the wrecking yard and the only cost so far has been that we put oil on it, like new oil, and it blows up, you're like, that's bad. But it's only $200 bad or $300 bad. It's not $10,000 bad, Yeah. So that's why I like junkyard motors so well. And the other reason I like them is because they've already run. If you put them on there and they're not hurt, and like we try to look for crashed cars, so that the thing was probably running when they got in a wreck, and so the motor's probably good. So we put the motor up there and run it, and then when it's running, we know, okay, look, now we can add boost to it, we can add nitrous, we can do whatever we want, and hopefully do it correctly and not hurt it. But again, if we do, we're not out that much.
No,
right.
Yeah, so we got a guy here, serious vet. He was like, Terry, Richard needs to test an LSA blower.
I do, definitely.
Yeah, I'm going to tell him. We had planned, me and Richard were planning to go to West Tech. I guess it was SEMA last year, being that SEMA didn't happen.
Yeah.
I was going to come out there like a week early or either stay a week late. And I was going to send him one of my LSAs, full blown, everything. And we were going to spend a couple days out there just testing every single case scenario from, I guess a cam. I guess we could have swapped out that a couple of them.
A couple, more than one. Yeah.
More than one, to cold air, to pulleys. We were going to go nuts.
Yeah.
We are going to go nuts, and we're still planning on doing that.
I would love it because I get questions all the time. We run lots of supercharged stuff, like especially I did not too long ago. I did the inexpensive like eBay Cadillac turbo or supercharger and intercooler that people were selling with adapters.
That was cool.
We did that, but everybody, as soon as they saw that, they're like, "Oh yeah, that's really cool." But we need you to do an LSA because an LSA is readily available and it doesn't take adapters, and you can make all of that work. So they want to see that, and I'm curious to see how much power it will support.
So leave a comment, everyone.
Yes.
We're definitely going to do that. I got the power. I got the tools. We got the knowledge. We got Richard. We just gotta send all the stuff out to Richard.
Exactly.
We're gonna even do how many different isolators? We're gonna go 245. We're gonna go 255. We're gonna do 235 isolators to see what I'm sorry.
Okay.
Pulleys to see which one, if it makes a difference between a 245, 255.
We can run ice water. We can do all kinds of stuff.
Yep.
Ice water, E85, all that's good.
Yep. And we just heard back from I want to say what's up to my man
Brian.
Brian.
I've known Brian since way back in the Wisco days and stuff.
Brian, he's the golden child. He's just a sweet guy. And
I've run the Pro LS cans. I like them, Brian. Everyone that I've tested and I've done the videos on, they've always worked pretty well.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna do that. We're gonna do air intakes. It's gonna be full. It's gonna be full. And I'm gonna be happy to be out there with my man.
So Jim has a question on compound boost. He wants to know if it's worth anything. And the thing that I will say about compound boost and as an absolute thing, the supercharger is kind of in the way. So if you want to make lots and lots of power and you have a turbo or turbos that can support that power level, that's the way to go. And that's what really big power is going to be like. But on the other end of the spectrum, if you have a big turbo and you're wanting to improve the spool rate of that turbo, the NA motor is not going to do that as well as a supercharged motor will. So let's say you have a 300 horsepower NA motor and then you add a blower to it, and now it's a 450 horsepower supercharged motor. The response rate of the turbo is going to go up dramatically now that you have the supercharger on. So it can help you, which is what Lancia did with their Delta rally cars and other people have done. So it's not like the ultimate form of boost, but it does have its place and it works very well. And plus, like I said, the reason that we do everything else in the world is because it's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And to say that you did it.
Exactly. So when somebody says, "Hey, Richard, have you ever tested?" Before they even finish their sentence, I can say yes.
Yes. Exactly.
So, Richard, I noticed this was a while back videos when you were testing the eBay turbos. What is your opinion on those?
I can tell you that all of the eBay turbos that I've ever tested, like I have a GT45 that I got from the guys at DNA, which is one of the sources from eBay. And I've had it for, I don't know, it's got to be like 8 or 10 years now. And I've run it on, I'm sure, 10 different engines, and we run it. And then when I'm done with it, I just take it and throw it on the ground, and then we go pick it up the next time. And so it's not like it's put in a velvet case and put up on the shelf, and it's just really just kicked around, and it's worked perfect. And the same thing with the CX Racing turbos. If you look at way back in 2010 when I did the first Big Bang motor with the guys from Hot Rod, those 76 millimeter turbos are still alive. And so that was in 2010 or right in the 2010 to 2011 changeover. So all of the ones that I've had have always worked, and I've only ever had one turbo go bad on the dyno, and it went out as soon as we started the motor up.
Wow.
So something was wrong with the machining or whatever was going on with the turbo. It immediately locked itself up. And before I start any of those turbos, and I think that this probably helps with the longevity of these things, is that I always take and I squirt. We have a squeezy bottle, so I squirt oil in the turbo and spin the shaft and spin it until oil's coming out, and then we hook up the oiling system. Because if you start up the motor and it has exhaust flow before it gets oil flow, you'll get a lot of bearing and impeller speed, and you'll have no oiling in there. So I like to give it a chance and kind of break it in before that, because you have no idea how long that turbo's been sitting, because if it got shipped over from China, how long it was there, how long it was in the boat, how long it was in the receiving warehouse and all that. So you just don't have any idea.
So
like
upside down, if it was right side up, or
you know, and with stuff stacked against it, so it's pushing on the thrust bearing. You know, you just don't know any of that stuff. So I like to try to give it a good chance, a good fighting chance, and I've had nothing but good luck with them.
That's, you know what, I bet you that's probably the reason why you had good luck, because you like pre-lube it. You know,
we're not going to be nice to it, so at least we're nice to it at the beginning. We'll buy it a drink first, and then
you talk to it, and everything. No, of course.
Yeah.
Now, what are those price ranges on those?
Well, that GT45 turbo that we use basically on everything. I've run that on everything from the little Honda all the way up to a big block Chevy. And that's about a 700 to 750 horsepower turbo, because that's kind of how I rate them, is we choose the turbo based on whatever power output we want. Mm-hmm. So that turbo is about 700 or 750, depending on what motor it's on. And that one cost $163.
Wow. That's crazy.
Well, it really, I mean, people don't realize it really is a good time to be a performance guy. Because I can remember thinking about trying to do turbo stuff like to my 5-liter Mustang, and there were car tech kits, but all that stuff was like $3, $4, $5 grand. And you know, back in the 80s, that was half as much as I paid for my car. So it was not something that was ever going to happen for me.
Well, let me ask you this, Rich. So if you said that turbo will cost about, like you said, like under $200, right?
Yeah. Now,
to have the entire setup, what are we looking at as far as, let's say you want to, like have that turbo on, I don't know, like let's say a regular, small block or something like that. I mean, with the plumbing, what do you think a person would be into?
Oh, wait. Let's go with a Cadillac 425.
There you go.
Well, I have a Cadillac 500, so I'm very familiar with those motors.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, I have a 500 that I did a bunch of stuff with Courtney and the guys from the Cadco out there. So we did a bunch of stuff together. You can easily run a turbo with any sort of exhaust system. So if you take your stock exhaust manifolds from whatever engine, from your Cadillac, we use the LS stuff, from a small block Chevy, from a Dodge, whatever it is, you route that exhaust to some sort of Y section that comes together to mount the turbo. And where that is going to depend on what chassis you're putting it in. So wherever that will fit. You route that together. If you can weld, that's going to be inexpensive. If you have to have somebody else do it, it's going to be more expensive. You're probably going to spend more money on the aluminum tubing and clamps and things that you need than you will on the major components. So you have the turbo, which is anywhere from $150 to $250, let's say. And then you have some kind of intercooler. Intercoolers, like the turbo, are very cheap. They can be as little as a couple of $100. But then you have lots of aluminum tubing to connect the turbo to the intercooler, and then the intercooler into the throttle body or carburetor or whatever it is you're doing. For guys building turbo kits, obviously they have other things that they're going to need. They're going to need, if it's a fuel injected car, they're going to need bigger injectors. So you have to go with decapped injectors, very common, or an 80-pounder. The Deca 80-pounder is fairly common and fairly inexpensive. Some sort of big fuel pump is going to be necessary. My guess is, I'll bet, and I was going to do a video on this. I was going to do 1,000 horsepower for $1,000. The turbo kit that you could put on, and we would pick an LS because it's the easiest one. But I think you could make 1,000 horsepower for $1,000.
Wow.
You'd have to do some of the work yourself. You'd have to do some of the welding yourself, but the parts are not that expensive.
Even if you have to farm out the welding, you're talking about maybe like $1,200, $1,300.
Yeah. I mean, it for like less than $2,000 easily with all of that done.
Well, here's another question. Now, you said you do the LS. Which particular LS would you go with? Because there's multitudes.
It doesn't matter, because the nice thing about the turbo kit is it would work with any LS, because the exhaust manifolds bolt on the same way. So It would work on a 4.8, a 5.3, a 6.0, 6.2, whatever combination that you want. The one that I would get for me is the one that I see most prevalent at the yard, and I go to the yards all the time, and we'll see 10 or 12 LS motors there. You're going to see, or what we see is a 4.8 or a 5.3. Those are the most common. I think I've seen one 6-liter there. I've never seen any aluminum motors.
No.
No. Yeah, recently I saw my very first front-wheel drive LS4, and it actually had 243 heads on it. So again, also the first time I've ever seen 243 heads in a yard. All the other ones are 706 and 862 heads.
Yeah, yep.
But the nice thing is a 5.3 with a cam and springs and a turbo, you can make 1,000 horsepower with that. And that's a ridiculous amount of power.
Now here's another question, real quick. Which heads do you prefer, the square port or either the cathedral? Which one?
Well, again, if I'm going to the wrecking yard and getting a 4.8 or a 5.3, I'm going to put cathedral port heads on it because the rec port's not going to fit. So I only have the option to use a rec port head if it's a 6-liter or a 6.2.
Right.
In that case, then I would, if I'm going to, the lowest cost way to do that would be to do a factory rec port head, because it flows more than any of the cathedral port heads do, and it will make more power.
Wow.
But if I'm doing aftermarket heads, I probably would pick a cathedral port head.
Interesting.
Tricks of the trade, I guess.
Yeah, man.
and again, the thing that not necessarily because I like one head more than the other, but one of the things I always talk about on my shows is that if we select a turbo for a given power level, so let's say we have a 1,000 horsepower turbo, we have an S475, an S480, a 7875 Gen 2 from VS Racing, we have our quintessential 1,000 horsepower turbo. You don't need a lot of other stuff in the motor to have it make that 1,000 horsepower. It's going to do that. If you have a turbo and an intercooler, big injectors, E85, any sort of canned 5.3, if I had 7 different cams up on the shelves, I could close my eyes, pick one of those things, never even look at it, put it in the 5.3, put springs on it, put that boost on it, and I could get it to make 1,000 horsepower. It doesn't have to be a turbo cam. It could be a nitrous cam, an NA cam, a blower cam. It doesn't matter. The turbo is going to do that. It's just going to take more or less boost to get it there. And that's one of the things that I've been trying to tell people is that every cam is a turbo cam. So, and not that there aren't better cams to help make that power, but what I'm saying is that if a guy has a motor and he has a cam in it, just add the turbo, man, and good things are going to happen.
Yeah, so you're saying the turbo really is the determinant. It's not the ancillary components around it. It's
like the restrictor plate on a restrictor plate NASCAR motor. It's going to determine what the power output is. If you only have a 700 horsepower turbo, you're not going to make 1,000 horsepower.
Right.
You can make 700.
Now, what kind of injectors would you recommend? Like, let's say someone wants to do like a 700 horsepower and they don't really care about that 1,000.
Yeah.
Is like a 55-pound, 60-pound injector okay? Or
the one that the go-to one is an 80-pound injector, and a good way to do that math is if you take the injector size, like we have an 80-pound injector, and you multiply that by 16, that will tell you how much power those injectors will support on a V8. That's naturally aspirated.
Naturally aspirated, right?
That's naturally aspirated because we're looking at, and that's assuming that it's a 0.5 brake specific fuel consumption number, which an LS actually does a lot better than that. I mean, we've seen them in the 4.3, 4.4 range, so it will actually make more than that. But then if you multiply that number by, well, we like to be conservative, so we say 0.75, that will kind of tell you what's going to happen under boost and how much power it will support.
Now, what gives you those numbers? What are those numbers? I mean, 16 and 0.75.
Well, 16 is basically, it takes a half a pound of fuel per hour to make 1 horsepower. Okay. So 1 pound will make 2 horsepower. So whatever the flow rate of the injector is, if you just double it, and then in this case, we're doubling that and then multiplying it by 8, which is the number of cylinders. You can also multiply it by 6 or 4 if you have a 6-cylinder or a 4-cylinder and get similar numbers. It's just really easy math. And you can do that in your head and go, okay, look, a 100 pound an hour injector can support 200 horsepower per cylinder. So whatever number of cylinders you have, you're like, okay, well, I can make this much power. And then we know that, oh yeah, we have way more injector than we're ever going to use. So we know that that's enough. If we have a 25 pound injector, it's only going to support 50 horsepower per hole. And that's only 400 horsepower on a V8. So that's not very much.
Okay, now that works. I would imagine that works also on superchargers and everything, right?
It works the same. The one thing about that guys don't realize about the supercharger is that it doesn't work directly for the power output because the supercharger also costs power. So it takes, for instance, I've seen lots of blower dyno testing. The guys at Kenny Bell have a blower dyno. They have a 500 horsepower blower dyno. So they can run the supercharger at speed, and they can measure the amount of airflow that goes through the blower at any given blower speed and boost level and output. And you can have, like, for instance, on some of these Roots blowers, you can have 250 or 300 horsepower worth of parasitic loss on the blower when it's spun all the way up at 20 pounds at 20,000 RPM. So the fuel has to be there to support that, even though you don't see it on a dyno, because it's there. It's just that it's not being used to motivate the car. It's being used to drive the blower.
Okay, now what about spark plugs and gapping? Because I got some NGKs up here for my LSA.
Yeah, NGKs are good plugs. We use. I'm less concerned with the manufacturer of the spark plug. Although there are some that I won't use, like a split fire. I'm not a big fan of E3 or any kind of the gimmicky plugs. But a typical NGK, or we've used Denzos sometimes only because they gave them a bunch of them. I'm more concerned with two things. One, the heat range of the plug. So if we run a turbo or a blower motor, we'll run an 8 or a 9 or a 10 heat range sometimes. And then the plug gap. So we bring it all the way down on boosted applications to about 19 or 20 thousandths.
Okay, cool.
That way you make it easier for the ignition to fire. If the ignition's having to work hard to jump across that gap, it's not going to do it. It's lazy. It's like, I'm going to pass on this one. You're going to have to catch me on the next round. and it just won't do that.
Wow. We're getting schooled. I was about to say that.
Schooled on turbos, man. You know, you did say I'm going to get one sooner or later, Richard. I think maybe I will.
Turbos are good stuff. But again, the thing is that guys ask me all the time, because obviously I do lots of turbo stuff. Well, is that your favorite thing? I'm like, no, it's not. The cool thing is that we get to choose. So some guys want all motor cars. That's awesome. Some guys want blower cars with big Roots blowers sticking out of the hood. I can totally see why. You have a jet boat, it's got to have an 871 on it, obviously, with 2 carburetors on it. Twin screw blowers, very efficient, fit under the hood, do all kinds of good stuff. Turbos, obviously very efficient and make lots of power per pound of boost. Some guys don't want to run the plumbing and the heat. They don't want to deal with all that stuff. The great thing is that if there was only one form of forced induction that was the best and everybody loved it and it was better than everything else, there would only be one. But there's not. There's lots of stuff for us to choose from, and all of us get to be individuals and get to make the things that we want.
I think also what it comes down to is, like, simplicity and also looks, because with a supercharger, I always felt that it was like a set and forget it. Because by the time anytime you change boots, you got to change pulleys, and that's a pain. And then especially if you're talking about LS, now you got to go and see the dyno or the tuner guy. Where a turbo.
The cool thing about the supercharger, and I remember, I wish I could give credit to the guy that wrote this, and I thought it was awesome, an awesome description, is that the supercharger sits down in the V of a V8 engine where God and nature intended it. And I thought that's like perfect. That's just awesome. And I wish I knew who wrote that, but whoever did, I salute you, because that's an awesome description for a supercharger.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. But the turbo, I mean, like if I was building a car flat out just for the track, straight quarter mile, I'm hitting a turbo because it's so tunable.
Yeah, and it will ultimately make more power per pound of boost. The one thing I can say is that I do like symmetry, and it's one of the things that I didn't like about, like, I drove around with a Vortec on my Mustang forever for, I don't know, 85,000 miles. So, and it worked really well, and it never let me down, and it's always awesome. But I didn't like the fact that when you lifted the hood, there was a Vortec on one side of the motor, and there wasn't one on the other side. I wanted there to be 2 of them so that it looked symmetrical, so that it would be, it would look cooler. I didn't need it. It made more than enough power, but I just wanted to have that visual appeal.
Well, I got a question from Brian. He wants to know about coils. Can you comment anything on the millisecond dwell?
You're gonna put it up.
There's a lot of questions about coils. Can you comment on millisecond dwell? When we set up, that's the one thing I like about running the Holley HP management system that I do. I'm not a tuner, but I use that a lot, and it's really easy to do for me to do the tuning at wide open throttle because it takes about 5 or 6 pulls and then it's all done. Doing the drivability is a whole different thing. But one of the things I like about that Holley is we can adjust the dwell time on the coil. And for us, we run 4 to 4.5 milliseconds on the coil, and that seems to produce enough spark. I mean, we've run more than 1,500 horsepower and 1,300 foot-pounds on the stock coils. So it's all I can tell you is when we do that with a tight enough plug gap and that setting on the dwell, that it seems to work and we don't get misfires. And that's just with a stock coil or a stock set of coils that I know nothing about, because it came from some used motor that we had. You know, they weren't even new.